I am your host, Danielle Mims. Welcome to Think Like a Kid, the podcast that helps parents and teachers stop guessing and start teaching the way kids actually learn. After working with hundreds of kids, I can promise you this: one-size-fits-all learning doesn't work. It's time to stop making kids fit the system and start shaping learning around the child. Each week, you'll get quick wins, creative ideas, and brain-based strategies to make learning hands-on and fun again. So whether you're in the classroom, the car, or halfway through your coffee, I am so glad you're here. Let's think like a kid. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Think Like a Kid. Thank you so much. If you are one of the people who have been listening or watching, you made this podcast launch so magical for me, and it was just really cool to hear feedback. And I never knew if anybody would listen. I was just like, you know what? I have so much to say, and just kind of sharing what I'm learning with my own children, because I will tell you, being a teacher is way different than being a mom. And I've struggled and I found different strategies. I continue to learn and I just love sharing that with you. So we're going to continue with that today. I am talking to you about something that parents and teachers, and me included, we all just kind of are like, is this working? Are they learning anything? Like those kinds of questions. And I actually got a DM a couple that were very, very similar. And it was about, how do I know if I'm challenging my kid enough at home? It's a very valid question. I mean, imagine sitting at the kitchen table, you have a brand new, beautiful workbook, you have your counters so that your kid can practice math, and they just start like flicking it, or they just start like, I'm bored. Can I just go do something else? And we're just like, wait, what? They can count to 20. I know that they're smart. Like, are they lazy? Like, we're just going through all these questions in our head and we're just like, okay, am I doing something wrong? So I'm going to share something with you today that has helped me obviously teach and then teach my own kids. And it is something called the Zone of Proximal Development. And I might have shared a little bit on my Instagram story about this, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. A lot of parents said that they wanted to know more. And this is not something that I made up by any means. I learned this in my undergrad and in my master's program, and then I used it throughout. So there was this famous psychologist, Vygotsky, and he came up with the Zone of Proximal Development, and they call that the ZPD. And essentially, that's the zone that you want your kid to be in when they're learning. And that's how we can make sure that when we're individualizing learning in a whole classroom, that we are reaching kids at their appropriate level. So think of the famous story, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And I always forget if it's it's Goldilocks. Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So remember when she comes in to the bear's house and there's porridge that's too hot, and there's porridge that's too cold, and then there's porridge that's just right. And then she goes to, I don't know, there was a chair that's too big, a chair that's too small, and a chair that's just right. That whole analogy is pretty much what you're going to carry over for your child and for learning. So if a task is too easy for them, they're going to check out. Like, it's not benefiting them at all to have them come over and recite their alphabet and count to 50 or 100 for their Aunt Sally. Like, there's just no business of continuing to do it, because the second that they get faced with a problem and they struggle, they're going to shut down because they've never been challenged. And they're just like, wait, I thought I was smart. My mom said I was smart. I can do this and this, but I can't do this. I hate learning, they shut down in their own way. And sometimes that's even more dangerous than the other extreme of things being way too difficult. So your kid loves to learn. I will just say, they're wired that way. If they are not liking learning time or practice, it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with the way that it's being presented to them or the methods. Like, you have to get creative with it. You have to meet them at their individual level. And so anyway, the other extreme of the zone is something that is too difficult for them. Like, what you're asking them to do, there's no bridge that went from one concept to another. They're just like, this is too hard for me. It doesn't make sense. Then they're going to have this negative self-talk. You've probably seen them in this zone. There's probably crying. There might be, I hate math, or I hate you, or
I don't like learning, or I'm not smart, or even throwing things, right? That's called the frustration zone. And that is destructive behavior. So we want our kids to struggle. We want our kids to be a little bit frustrated, but it has to be that sweet spot, that Goldilocks sweet spot, so that they're able to be productive and actually have their brain learn. If you push your child when they're at a learning a concept or trying to do a task that's out of that zone, they're going to shut down. And actually, in the former episode that we talked about with the amygdala, their watchdog is barking really loud, or their alarm system is barking really loud. And so the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for the learning, that's all shut down. So pushing them, saying, come on, you're almost done. Just do one more H, trace one more H, and then you're done. You're good to go. There's no point of doing that. Like, it's not going to help them. It's actually going to backfire on you, on them, and they're going to associate that memory with who they are as a learner. So I'm telling you, if they've left that sweet spot zone, do not push them to keep going. So the sweet spot. I like to tell you that teachers can figure out this sweet spot of learning and to see if their instruction has been beneficial by looking at test scores, right? If a kid is struggling through, but they're getting a lot of the concept right, maybe they need a little bit of help, maybe they need some manipulatives, teachers are able to look at test scores to help shape their teaching. First of all, and then another story is like if a kid is failing tests, that has nothing to do with them, right? That's the teaching method. And that's why teachers are held accountable for test scores, right? Like a kid's not, their needs are not being met fully. So, anyway, as parents, we're not giving our kid assessments where we're looking at the data, but there are formative assessments, which are things that you do every day without even realizing, and they're observable. Something physical that you can even notice if your kid's in the ZPD that you want them to be in. Maybe their face is like frowning a little bit, or maybe their tongue sticking out when they're working. Have you ever seen that? My dad used to actually do that when he was working, and I picked it up as a kid, and I was like, I'm gonna stick my tongue out when I'm like writing and stuff like that. But it never stuck with me. But my three boys, they all stick out their tongues when they're in the zone and they're productively struggling. And then another way to know is if they're like talking to themselves, or if they're asking themselves questions, kind of narrating their thoughts. Maybe they're asking the adult some really great questions. Maybe they need a little bit of help. That's all productive struggle. That's actually helping their brain grow and learn. And that's exactly where you want them to be. So that is the gist of the zone of proximal development. And I know it's difficult to kind of, task by task or concept by concept. Please know that my emails are and my Instagram DMs, they're always open. I'm starting to get better at Facebook too. But send me a message. I would be honestly happy to help. So I did write down some ideas for you to do so that you can look at productive struggle. So the practical strategies that you can stay in that like magic zone with them. I'm going to give you 4 different strategies that you can use today or tomorrow or this week. And just let me know if you use them. So I wrote them down. The 10-second rule. So when you see your kid struggling, I want you to count in your head to 10, not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I get that it's hard to watch your kid struggle. Like, I get it. I didn't have that hard of a time watching my students struggle. And then it's like watching my own kids. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're like, think of something as like simple as a puzzle piece. You're just like, flip it, like turn it, but like when they're in this struggle and they're not in the frustration, like the uber like frustration, like not the crying one. When they're in the zone and they're starting to struggle, count to 10 in your head before you jump in. You want to give them time. You want to give their brain time to bridge the gap from what they're not connecting. The biggest mistake you can make is rescuing them too early. And I know that your kid might say, I don't know this, or like, you got to help me, blah, blah, blah. They actually don't want you to help. Like, they have such a sense of pride and fulfillment when they are able to connect the dots and they're able to figure it out. So just a friendly reminder to let them struggle a little bit. The second one is called the build a bridge hint. So you're not going to just give them the answer. You're going to give them a hint that connects to something that they already know. So If they forget the number 7, say, "That's the one that looks like a hockey stick, remember?" Or you're connecting it to something that they would remember. So, like, an example that I did with my son Kason is for some reason, the letter sound I is really hard for him to remember. Like, I makes the sound. So he'll be like, umbrella. Wait, no. And then he'll just start guessing. So then I'll just go like, I won't even say anything. I'll just go, and then if he doesn't pick it up, I'll be like, oh, I have a, and he knows that the I says for itch, and then he'll remember. So just sometimes you don't even have to use your words. You could point, you can, use a certain sign that you guys came up with, or try to have them use different clues, different scaffolds to help connect it. Number 3 is be the scribe for them. So if you're doing like a math lesson, you don't need to make them write the numbers if they're already struggling, because writing alone is a physical skill and it's exhausting. So even like in the classroom, like jumping grades ahead, if a kid was just not able to complete like a writing task, and I'm like, okay, let's do a computer, right? Like we could type it instead. It was still hard. Like it's not, if I'm working on writing and the concept of writing like a narrative or something like that, I don't need them to write the letters. We're not focusing on handwriting right now. So think about it in that kind of sense. Like if you're doing a math lesson and you're working on one-to-one correspondence with your kid, and they're starting to struggle, just be the scribe. Like they don't need to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They don't need to write that if they're already struggling. What can you kind of take away while you're working on a different skill? Number 4 is the 3-to-1 success ratio. So confidence is the engine of learning. For every one task that is like new or like hard or difficult for them, then give them 3 tasks that they've already mastered. So this keeps that tank in their body like, I can do this. I'm confident. I'm successful. It keeps that tank really full. So something that I do have a kiddo who does struggle with learning, and he has a difficult time. He's very hard on himself. He does shut down. I have to get really creative. But a lot of the tasks that are easy for him that I do that 3-to-1 ratio, I do for something like, oh, my 2-year-old will struggle. All right, I'll just put this in context. So my 4-year-old's the one who has a difficult time learning. So if I'm doing a task that's hard for him, I might say, oh, Rowan, who's my 2-year-old, is struggling with he's struggling with how to put those puzzle pieces in. I don't know if do you think you could maybe help him, right? So that's a very easy task for him. He's a leader, he's confident, he's feeling successful. So you can pick tasks that are, you could frame it as like a challenge, but it's easier for them to keep that tank filled. Real life examples. I saw this recently with a mom who is forcing her kid to trace letters. And if you look at those tracing pages, there's like, I don't know, 50, like what child wants to trace 50 G's? I'm sorry. He hated it. She hated it. Everybody hates it. And in that moment, I wanted to be like, "Oh, fine motor is an issue, right?" Or like cut down like just because a workbook page, say that you're doing workbook pages. We could talk about this a different time. They don't have to do all of them. Like why? It makes no sense. If they've already mastered 3 of them, why would they have to do 50? It doesn't make sense. So anyway, if I was that mom, I would say, all right, let's do this with a different utensil, right? We could do shaving cream. We could build the letter, what did I say? Letter G. We could build the letter G with Play-Doh. We could do it with Wiki Sticks. Or if just fine motor in general is just like, he's just like taken back from it and he does not want to practice with any form of that. Maybe like at the grocery store, you guys are searching for the G sound, right? Maybe you found some grapes that can go to the list, right? You're just kind of taking away what's bothering them in that moment and then replacing it with something that feels better for them. So maybe that kid's brain would feel better with more verbal, or like I said, removing the utensil and trying something out. So anyway, I will wrap this up. I'm trying to keep these very short and digestible and not just, on and on and on and on. So today and this week, I want you to focus on being the ZPD, which is what again? Is the zone of proximal development, like a detective. So watch your child's face, see if you also notice like their tongue out, or maybe they do something else when you know that they're in the zone. And just take note of that and note like, Okay, what kind of project or task are they working on? And like, oh, that must be a little bit of a struggle for them, but they're pushing through. And always, always, always remember to reward the process and praise the process instead of like the final outcome. Like, you tried so hard, you didn't give up when things got hard. Talking about grit and perseverance, and because that's what we're all about, right? We're trying to build up our kiddos to be the most successful and to be exactly who they were meant to be. All right, that's enough. I hope that you have a fabulous week. Keep thinking like a kid.
Thank you for listening to Think Like a Kid. If this episode gave you an idea, a reframe, or a little win, the best way to say thank you is to share it with a friend or leave a quick review. It helps more parents and teachers find these conversations, and honestly, it means the world to me. Until next time, friend, keep meeting kids where they're at and keep thinking like a kid.